This episode was brought to you by Resilient Nutrition. Pals, greetings and welcome to another episode of Everything Endurance. It is, as always, and I know I always say this, but I genuinely always mean it, an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. Apologies, there was a little break there, but I promise you I had a very good excuse for being away for a little while. I've been doing something that's been unthinkable over the last 12 months. I have been out there covering a race. A real, genuine, multi-day ultra race. I have, of course, been working behind the scenes on the Montane Spine Race. We have just had the absolute best week, just absolutely the perfect tonic for 12 months of pandemic stagnation, an opportunity to see some of the best countryside that Britain has to offer, watch some runners reach targets that they've been trying to reach since way before the pandemic. Some of these guys have been working towards finishing a spine race for 2 years or more now, and we got to watch them go over the line. Got to see 2 new course records get set. There were some great stories further down the pack, as there always are. Hashtag Lesbins is a legend. Look into the coverage if you don't know what I'm talking about there. It's just been the greatest week, just another opportunity to watch a load of people achieve something that they thought unthinkable previously. A bunch of ultra runners beat themselves to a pulp in the name of glory out there in the rainy British summertime. It's been fantastic. So apologies if I'm a little bit, over animated, if I'm speaking a little bit quickly here, if I sound over caffeinated. I'm just excited because I had such a wonderful time. For anyone who was following the race at home, for anyone that was watching the race coverage while we were out there and is thinking, yeah, I fancy a go at the summer spine race. That looks up my street. Even if the distance of a full summer spine seems intimidating, there's obviously the sprint now, the sort of 46-mile version, which, trust me, is still not an easy race, but, a more achievable target for a first-timer on the spine than the 268-mile epic that is the full race. If you are at all interested in taking part in next summer's summer spine races, head over to thespinerace.com now, and I mean literally now. It's the 2nd of July as I record this. It's the 2nd of July as this episode comes out, and for you guys that are listening to this as soon as it comes out, thank you, subscribers, head over to the website now, because they opened their entries for next summer yesterday, and I happen to know at least half of those places have gone already as I talk and record this on the Friday morning. So boom, if you are interested in the race and you're listening to this now, get to thespinerace.com quickly. All right. There's a very spiny theme to today's podcast. You've obviously already seen the name in the title of this episode, so I'm not ruining it for anyone, but we're going to do this bit where I talk through a bit of their race CV as if we're playing a guessing game, because I like doing it. I like building up the runners, and this runner in particular. We are going to be talking to a runner today who had just begun establishing herself in sort of 2019 as someone with an exceptional amount of talent at the sort of 100-mile-ish length ultramarathon. She got 5 wins under her belt in 2019, and just as we got into 2020 and another season was ready to kick off, managed to A, get herself injured, and B, get embroiled, just like the rest of us, in a worldwide pandemic. End of racing for a while. So not just was the summer spine race a brilliant return to racing for all of us who enjoy this scene, it was the perfect return to racing for this runner, who came 2nd overall, first one over the line, and set a new course record, beating a record that was set a couple of years ago by Sabrina Verjee. That's a name you'll have heard quite a few times. I've mentioned her a number of times on the podcast. We are talking an absolutely world-class ultra running athlete there. And this runner who we're going to be talking to today has now pushed her way into those upper echelons. I couldn't be more happy for her. She's an absolutely wonderful character and an exceptional athlete. We are today, of course, going to be talking to Anna Troup. Hashtag Super Trooper. Anna, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling really good, thank you, Will. It's been almost a week. In fact, I was thinking this morning, wow, a week ago I was sort of heading into Bellingham, so it's been quite the week.
Wow, God, yes. Oh, God, it's gone really quick, hasn't it?
Yeah, really fast. And we stayed up in Kirkgate after it finished, right to the end. So we didn't know when we were going to finish, so we had our B&B booked for the whole time, from the Tuesday all the way through to the Saturday. Kids were covered, so we stayed and watched everyone else come in. So we've had an amazing week.
Oh, brilliant. I'm so glad you got to, transition to being a spectator for the latter part of it.
Yeah, totally. It was good.
Yeah, there were some big finishes towards the end as well. That weather just became horrendous towards the end. What a battering those guys absolutely didn't need in a summer race.
Yeah, I really felt for them. And they were coming in after being out there for so long, absolutely soaking, feet, such a mess. And then poor Heidi up there at Hut 2. My heart was breaking. It was like she was so close. It was awful to watch.
While Heidi was making her last approach into Kirkgate, I was obviously online. I'm watching the tracker. I'm watching social media. I had 4 different people who've volunteered on the spine over the years and are attached to it, all messaging me at the same time, asking me what's going on. You just wanted to scream at the laptop. You can do it. You can do this.
I know, it was awful.
It's consuming watching those dots. For anyone that hasn't let it sweep them away, it really does consume you. And congratulations to Heidi for getting as far as she did. She was tremendously tough to do that much.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I sense we could talk about this for a full hour, which would be really good for us, but not necessarily what people have come to this podcast for. So I might have to just veer us off topic a little bit. It being the first time we've talked to you, Anna, I'd like to go back a little bit. I'd like to talk a little bit about how your relationship with running started. So, were you a sporty youth and you were destined to lace up a pair of running shoes at some point, or is this just something you fell into later in life?
Something I fell into, really, because I started life as a netball player, turned up at university as a netball player, and then, as you tend to, if you end up at Oxford, Cambridge, ended up in a rowing boat. And so actually I was a rower, and I would have said that's how I categorized myself for many years, as a rower. A heavyweight rower when I was at university, and then as I sort of left university, turned into a lightweight rower. So running becomes a bit of a part of your life if you're a lightweight rower, especially if you're a tall lightweight rower like me, trying to make weight. It was one of the ways that you just did some extra training. So I was never a particularly great runner, but it was a part of training. Once I stopped rowing and I suppose had the children, running became something I could fit in around small girls. I also did a bit of Ironman, as you do, because that's what you tend to transition to if you've been a rower. It's kind of a natural transition that lots of us go through.
I hadn't realised that. There's a lot of rowers go into Ironman territory.
Yeah, because we're just endurance athletes, and the running and the leg strength and everything else transitions really easily.
Tremendous cardiovascular fitness with rowers.
Yeah, exactly.
Resting heart rates of 4,
Some of them. And I suppose because especially the lightweight rowers, we tend not to be huge, like the sort of 6'8" guys, so we can actually sort of get on a bike and move a bike. And so Ironman was something that I had quite a lot of fun with for a couple of years, but I'm not a swimmer and I didn't love swimming, and trying to train for 3 sports around work, around family, that was just a no. So I suppose that was really what then transitioned to me to just running, and did some marathons. And then when Richard came back into my life about 12 years ago, the pair of us were looking for something to do together, and we randomly came across UTMB, and thought that would be really good. Why don't we do that? He again has this long distance endurance background, again from the rowing, again from the Ironman. So we both said, okay, let's do that. And just even trying to work out how you do a UTMB, that whole point system, if you're new to it, it's just it's a maze, isn't it? So yeah. Richard, who's good at the stuff, worked that all the way through, and we found some good races with the right points. And this is back in 2012, 2013. So it's not as hard to get into back then. So we literally just applied, got in. And our very first ultra was Hardmoors, We had no idea what we're doing. I've read bits about it. I think I'm going to get hypothermia. My rucksack is enormous. It's absolutely enormous. And we both crossed that line, and it must have taken us forever, 17 hours or something stupid. And we both were just like, this is the best thing. It was Richard, who'd been up Everest by this point, come back down. He felt that this was a massive achievement. And I think Ultra just gave us this huge sense of achievement. And it went from there. Then we went and did something in the lakes because we needed the points. And then off we went to UTMB. And that's really where it started, and it's never really stopped. We've just carried on and really enjoyed the adventures, and we've always done them together, and it's been fantastic. So that's what sort of got us to the Spine, which was Richard saying to me, what do you want for your 50th birthday? And me saying, well, actually, I'd really like an entry to the Spine. That's what I'd like to do, and I'd like you to do it with me, and I'd like you to do the planning. So my birthday present is you to do all the work, and I'll just turn up and run. And then, of course, we were actually racing while the Spine entries came out. I think we were doing the Arc of Attrition, and we missed the winter entry. I was absolutely gutted. We missed it. I know, because they sell out really fast.
Oh, God, incredible. It's like Glastonbury.
Yeah, it was. And we were like, oh, my God, they've all gone. And so we said, OK, well, we'll put in for the Summer Spine and get on the waiting list for the Winter Spine, and we'll view the Summer Spine as a big recce for the Winter Spine. Then we did get a place in the Winter Spine, but COVID hit. So everything's been postponed. So we are now, here I am at 51, we are now on that 50th birthday journey. One down. So
well, happy birthday.
Thank you. Way back in March. But yeah, so that's how it all happened, Will.
Wow, fantastic. You've kind of covered my question that I was going to bring in there, which is, what attracted you to ultra running? It seems to be tied into this tremendous sense of achievement you get from doing something this big. Would you say that's fair?
It definitely is, but it's also the adventures and the fact that it takes us to places that we wouldn't normally go. So if I take the Spine, we recce'd the whole thing. We'd gone up, we'd done a couple of days here, a couple of days there. It makes us go and see bits of the UK and bits of other countries that actually we've never done before. So neither of us, I'd done bits of the Pennine Way when I was 13 at school, but neither of us have actually done any of that area. And we've discovered from fantastic countryside that without the Spine, we'd never have gone to look at. So you'd never go and choose bog. You'd never go and choose rubbish weather. But actually, once you're there, it's kind of worth it. And so that's been the big driver as well. The ultras take you into these big journeys and these new areas. So the achievement's great, don't get me wrong, but it's actually that sort of build up is also fantastic.
Okay. I when I was looking through your results earlier, what I saw was a definite sort of quite sharp upward trajectory into 2019, where there seems to be this 12-month period where you were just winning every race you set foot in. What changed on the run into that? And you really seem to start specializing it around this sort of 100-mile mark as well. So what happened there?
I'm not sure anything actually happened. I think I got more confident to go a bit slower, maybe off the start. And I'm not a very slow runner, but I'm not a particularly fast runner. So I think those longer races definitely suit me. And I think I did a couple without Richard because he was off doing this tour thing where you go off on the bike and you do the whole Tour de France. You do it the week ahead of time, the Tour de Force, and he did that. So he was off for 3 weeks, which meant I did Wendover on my own and I did Lakeland 100 on my own. And I think that probably I just ran my pace and had to sort of do it on my own. And that was, I don't think that changed anything, but it was maybe just me sort of saying, okay, I can do this. So Lakeland 100 was for me the first race where I thought, actually, I can do these things okay. Until then, I hadn't had that, I suppose, self-confidence to think, and wins were just sort of lucky. But Lakeland 100, yes, Sabrina did drop out post the Spine. And I think if she'd been there, she'd probably have won it. But, someone has to, you still then have to come through. And I know my last leg in that was really fast compared to most people taking part. So I think I learned I get stronger in the second half and just to let people go and not to worry about it. And we really worked on the nutrition and trying to work. I used to get terribly, terribly sick. And even that year, I was getting really, really sick and doing most of them on no food at all.
Wow.
Literally, I just couldn't hold food down. I remember doing our Bob Graham and getting to the top, one of those last hills and throwing up on the top and Richard just going, come on then, let's go. So that was the sort of standard thing.
You've marked your territory. We can move on now.
Yeah, exactly. And so we worked out that if my heart rate went high off the start, then I started to get very sick. It was almost like your body shuts down. If it's had to work too hard, it takes the blood to wherever it's needed. So if we could keep me very, very steady off the start, then actually I had a fair chance of doing okay and getting food down. And so we worked really hard on that. Actually, after Lakeland 100, we went and did something called Exodus. We worked really hard on that, keeping heart rate low. And I had a fantastic race and I really loved it. And so I think as we went into the spine, that was really in the back of our minds. How do I then, just keep my heart rate really low off the start, just let everyone else go. We run our own race. And that's what we've worked hard on. But I seem to recover well. I've got lucky on that. Obviously, I was out for a whole year in between that good patch and now with a broken heel. So it's been a whole year on a bike.
I hadn't realised that. I'd heard you allude to this year out at one point, but I just assumed you were referring to the pandemic, the sort of universal year out that we've all had from events.
No, I hit sort of March, I suppose 2020, because we're 2021 now, and we're 2020. And I just was out for a run one day and my foot really hurt. And 10 years ago, I've actually, the bones in my arches don't move. I've got a coalition. They don't move as other people's would naturally move. So the two are slightly fused. So when you sort of hit the ground, instead of your feet doing that and those bones sort of naturally compressing, my front of my heel bone just takes it. Ooh. So it's just unlucky, but the right one went 10 years ago and I was in a boot for 5 or 6 months. And then unbeknownst to me at the beginning of lockdown, the left one went. But of course, being a classic runner, no, it's just a niggle. No, I'm sure
I'll run it off.
Exactly. All of that stuff. And right the way through to June, we were doing big 100-mile type sort of virtual stuff. We were walking on it. And come June, I finally had an MRI and they went, oh yeah, that's a big stress fracture. So... Oof. So then I was literally off all of the stuff until it took till March. That's the thing, the equivalent of being old and also just not giving it time. Every time I was like, yes, it's nearly better, right? Let's get out there. It wasn't better, back again. And so, yeah, it's been mostly a turbo for 9 or 10 months. And hiking, slowly as the impact was allowed to come back, hiking with packs and doing that. So...
I'm sure people will be interested to hear about that your sort of training regime for the spine race, you were forced for it to be done mainly low impact on a bike and hiking.
And weights.
And weights.
Partly being an older lady, but also just generally, I think the big weights really helped. The big leg strength weights for the eccentric stuff, because I couldn't get onto hills. We don't live in a very hilly place. We live in the Chilterns. So it was a case of how do we replicate? But turbos are brilliant. You can train really hard. I think I was fitter for the spine than probably any time for many years, just because you can get your heart rate up there. You can do really hard sessions, which as an older athlete, you risk it if you do those really hard sessions. You are asking to get injured if you do them too frequently. Well, I am anyway. So, to go out and do sprints is just not an option. Whereas you can nail yourself on the bike and get all of the same sort of physiological benefits. So that's what we were busy doing, just turbo after turbo after turbo. It was really tedious. We watched awful lot of TV, awful lot of podcasts. But yeah, that was our last year.
Well, I mean, that rubbishes the next one of my questions here, which was, how did the pandemic affect your training regime? I guess not a desperately large amount, ultimately.
No, it was the bike and it was the gym, which had sort of quietly built as a gym in that time, which made a really, big difference. So it was us and the kids and messing around in gyms and on bikes and when we could, getting out with packs. So because we thought we were going to be doing the winter spine first, we'd sort of built our pack, if you like. We got all the kit, and that was a really super heavy pack. And then we'd just get out for 20-mile hikes. And then we slowly built them up to sort of back to back to back. And I suppose with the pandemic, work meant that you were on Zoom as opposed to in offices. So my travel went to zero, which actually created a lot more time to be able to get out and do those long, because doing those hiking sessions just takes forever compared to a run. It's like 20 miles. Okay, here we go, 5 or 6 hours, which you don't have to do when you're running. You can get it done out of the way. So the pandemic actually gave us the time to be able to do those slightly longer sessions because we're in the middle of nowhere. So it was good.
No, it makes good sense. I asked a similar question to Ian Keith on the run up to the event, and he said a similar thing. Actually, it gave him a lot of time back, and what is he used to if not social distancing? Being on his own out in the hills for hours and hours at a time, not far from where he lived, was fine. He didn't mind that at all. So, yeah.
that was us in our bubble off up hills. Yeah.
Fantastic stuff. Also, one thing that I found while I was sort of doing a little research this morning, because unbelievable as it may be to anyone who's listening to this, I do sometimes do some research before these interviews. Did I read that your daughters are now aspiring ultra runners as well, the Javelina Jundred?
Yeah, so when they were younger, they both said they really wanted to do 100 miles, and we said, well, you know what that actually really entails, and being, but they really were keen, and you can't make teenagers do anything they don't want to do. So this had to come from them, and so because they were girls and fully formed, we said, okay, fine. If this is something you really want to do, then we've got to build up for it. So we had this sort of year of training where we built them up. They're not allowed to race in the UK. So we put them into Javelina in the States because, again, the parent piece said that's a loot course. Perfect. So if we have to drop out at 40 or 60 or whatever, we can stop. We can manage it. So because we were going to do it with them and make sure they were fine. And being America, we knew the aid stations would be ridiculous, so there wouldn't be too much, need to carry food or whatever. Yeah. So they both said they desperately want to do it. My little one, Bella, got horrendous anemia very randomly. And so she wasn't able to race. She wasn't allowed to travel. Just very unluckily got mega anemia, nothing to do with running. But my big one, who was 16 at the time, Millie, said, I still want to go. So Bella stayed with her grandmother and we took Millie. And yeah, she was the youngest finisher. I think she took 27 hours had a brilliant race. I think did most of it. The first 40 or 50, she really did great running. And then we were into that sort of power hiking and bits of running. And she suffered in the heat because, Rich and I had never done this, the arm warmers. We've just been watching all the Western States coverage and they're talking about the ice. And it really is there. And you're putting it down your arm warmers and you're putting it on your head. And it was...
Wow.
It was a totally different experience, but cool. It was cool.
That's incredible. It's good to see a sort of new generation of aspiring ultra runners come through, because if you look around on an ultramarathon start line, you don't see a lot of people in their 20s, do you? No, there aren't a lot of younger people that seem to come into the sport. So I'm glad you're sort of passing on the torch, as it were. Although I think it's a bit early for you to pass on the torch entirely, but you know what I mean.
Well, Millie's actually, so she's got the Lakeland 50. She entered herself, got randomly lucky in that ballot, and is doing the Lakeland 50 in a few weeks' time as well. So yeah, she just quite likes being out there and doing these things. It's good. We can't get them training. We just say, if you want to do it, make sure you've done the training. And actually, really? Sophie Grant, we handed Millie on to Sophie Grant. Sophie's a lovely friend of mine, and Sophie's now coaching Millie, because we just said, look, we're not getting involved anymore. We're not telling you to go out of the door. If a coach tells you to go out of the door, then maybe, that's between you and your coach. But we're not getting... So she's been working with Sophie, and that's worked really well.
Fantastic. I'm really glad to hear it. But let's get into it. Let's talk about the spine race. Firstly, I can't believe I've got this far into the podcast without saying congratulations again. I don't know how many times I typed it while I was talking about you putting social media posts up. What an absolutely incredible performance. It got to a point after a couple of days where it just didn't feel like there was any doubt that you were going to get there, from our side anyway. So I'd love to hear about the experience from your side, sort of how well prepared you felt as you came in, and what your plans were. Like, did you know you were going to be able to be as quick as you were? I've got a million questions here, Anna. Just go.
So, we arrived and we'd done a proper taper, which is a horrible thing to do, as every person will know who does any of these races. So we had actually tapered, but by definition, you taper and you feel completely rubbish. And I think, so we arrived and we got to that car park and we just didn't know what to expect. I think one of the issues with any big race that you've never done before is you just truly don't know how the whole thing is going to work. And so that's why we devoured all of everybody else's podcasts. We've read and looked at and read blogs and anything we could get our hands on to try and work out what this thing might be like. We got lucky with a car parking space. That was the first stress out of the way, because we were going to have to dump the car in Edale for a week. And we're like, what if we can't find a space? There's all these sort of small things that add up. And I think we were the first people through registration. And then we just sort of sat in the car going, right, now what do we do? What do we do? We don't start till 4. And it's quite a low key start, really, isn't it? Yeah. And especially with waves.
Yeah, absolutely. Normally there'd be a bit more hubbub than there was, but the start waves thinned everything out.
So, and I think it was quite hard to judge the weather, although we'd looked at it and gone, you know what, I don't think it's going to be that hot overnight. So we literally started in T-shirts and arm warmers on the basis that we felt that probably the weather was going to be quite kind that first night. And then the top guys just disappeared up the road. I've never seen anything like it. They went off like a tin kettle. Oh, wow, we are so going to have to take this steady. And they just disappeared. We just didn't see them. And then even all the way up Jacob's Ladder and all the way over Kinder Scout, that first bit, men just overtaking. And I just kept saying, you know, Richard, are we going fast enough? And he was just like, no, we're going to do our race and we're going to keep our heart rates low. And so we're going up Jacob's Ladder and he's constantly saying, what's your heart rate? Where is it? Bring it down. Are you sure it's okay? So we really were very, very well. Richard was really, really controlled about that whole piece up and over. And it was hot. It was really hot. So
it was a baking day, yeah.
Yeah, and you have to control water. So again, this was one of our queries around the spine. Would we get extra water? So we'd gone off with what we thought was enough, but actually it was probably not enough for the heat. So Richard, for the first time, got out his little bee-free thing and was trying to find streams. He was like, do you think that one's okay? I was like, I've got no idea if it's okay, but in theory, it's going to filter. If you die, you die. Go for it. So he was taking water, and then we finally got some water. We missed the first one and got to the second one, and the mountain rescue guys went, well, you can have 500 mils. That's it. So I think that's quite a useful thing for people to know. They will give you water, but they're not just going to fill you up. Yeah. You can have 500 mils. But that for me was plenty. I think Richard was now starting to suffer in the heat, but then it cooled down as we got towards Hebden. And I have to say Hebden was hilarious because it's up a big hill, which is fine. But then it was like these church pews and everyone's in these church pews. And again, we don't know what to expect. And we kind of walk in and we get given our drop bags for the first time. And then people are running around saying, do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want the other? And you can't really sit down because you've got your bag and a pew and there's no space for you to sort of wiggle. So in the end, I think it was a break, but it wasn't a stop. It was just like literally a bit of a refill. And then we just said, okay, there's no point. We've just got to go. Richard needs to eat. So we just waited while he got lots of food down. And then we just went. And then we went off into the rain because it was now pouring, really wet. And I suspect this is where people's feet started to get destroyed because everybody got drenched. And I think this is probably where Richard's feet really started to fall apart. And my mind got a bit sore, but I think his really got sore because it was very, very wet. And then again, it went off into another hot day. So as we headed off to Hardraw and we're coming down towards Hardraw, Richard is really starting to suffer now. And up Pennine, he's starting, I know that because I've raced with him enough, I know that he's starting to struggle a little bit. And then we managed to get him some water at Horton. And then we carried on all the way to Hardraw, and then he just hit Hardraw and now he's fainted on the floor. So it was like, okay, now what do we do? I have Richard on his back on the floor saying, I don't think I can continue. I'm not sure I'm going to continue. And I'm saying, well, I've never navved. I'm not sure I should be doing the nav up there. And so we're literally having this domestic. And I've had one of the spine team, I think it was Stu, was probably standing there going, one of you continuing, one of you not continuing? And this went on for ages. I think I'll leave you two to it. So we had a massive debate about what was going to happen next. So in terms of what had we planned, we certainly hadn't planned for that. And we certainly hadn't planned for the fact that Richard had all the charges. And we were going to suddenly say, so I'm in this position, he's saying, you've got to carry on, you're in the lead. And I'm like, but it was meant to be an adventure together. And he's like, no, but you've got to carry on. I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, well, I'll be fine, but you've got to carry on. So I had my feet down and we faffed for ages. And I put a ton of clothes on because now people are saying, well, if you're going to walk out with Richard, you need to have loads of clothes on. So I put everything on. I've got a puffer jacket on. I've got leggings on. I've got the whole works on. And in the end, I just went and Richard just said, go. So I headed up out of Shunnerfell and I'm really scared because I've never done this stuff and it's dark and it's Shunnerfell. And I think one of the spine guys went, if you can get lost up there, that's impressive. It's just a big track. I'm thinking, you don't know my nav. And get lost in most places. So I did, and I headed up, but I'm absolutely, far too many clothes. So there's stop after stop after stop. So I take a layer off, another layer off. And by now my pack is enormous because it's just a Salomon pack and I'm trying to shove in puffers and extra layers. I'm now carrying 2 pairs of leggings. I'm down to just sort of nothing. So I'm carrying double everything at this point. So my pack for that section is ridiculously heavy.
Wow.
But we get up and over, and I get to Tan Hill, and James Leaveley is sitting there. And James said that was the shittiest section of the Pennine Way. I think that's my worst section. I said, I totally agree. That was utterly shit. So the pair of us are sitting at the top of Tan Hill, and he's having a cup of tea. And I said, come on, James, why don't you come with me now for a couple of months? Let's head on out. So James actually came with me, and we had a couple of really nice hours just trudging through the bog on our way from Tan Hill down towards Middleton. And then James stopped to fill bottles, although he didn't said actually he stopped for a sneaky bivvy. And so I just carried on. And so from the underpass on, I was basically on my own. And that was a wholly different thing, because I'd expected to have a sleep at Tan Hill. Then I understand that you can't sleep there during the summer, occasionally during the winter. So these are the things you don't know. Okay, you've got to crack on to Middleton. Got to Middleton, and it was just so nice to see people, because I'd now been on my own for what felt like forever, and I'm just not used to racing on my own. And it was just great. And it was a really lovely aid station. Everyone was really friendly and looked after me really well. Jen was running it. Kevin was there. And I had half an hour sleep there, but it was too cold to sleep, really. I was absolutely freezing because we hadn't packed sleeping bags. So there you are. You asked what the plan was. It wasn't to have large kits anywhere. It was just to keep going, pretty much. So we had no sleeping bag.
Not in the drop bag. No. Oh,
no,
wow.
Because you've got 20 kilos.
Yes, of course.
And we were sort of weighing up sleeping bag versus our little double espresso Starbucks coffees versus way too many clothes. I packed so many clothes, so many changes of kit. I thought I was going to have a shower at Middleton, but the shower turned into a dribble, so no one could have a shower. And so you sort of, all these things that I should have just done my teeth, forgot about changing, forget all of that, just crack on. But you just get into this mindset of, I'm changing, and I'm going to sort of vaguely have a shower. So, and they fed me, and I had curry, and someone said it's 7 o'clock in the morning. I was like, wow, I'm having curry at 7 o'clock in the morning. That's weird. That's really weird, but it tastes great. And then I just sort of went off on my way again. I was a bit nervous about the next section. I wanted to make sure it was completely in the light, because it was Cauldron Snouts, it was the boulders, it was High Cup Nick, bits that we'd recce'd, but bits again. I mean, I'm not necessarily a mountain person. I can scramble if I have to. I'd rather not. And I kind of know that, and you are on your own. You're completely on your own.
Yeah. I mean, that particular section of the course, I think you were absolutely on the money there to head into it knowing you had as much daylight as possible ahead of you. All you'd have needed for it to be a low cloud day, and you're in trouble up there.
That's right. And I'm trying to do it off my watch. I'm trying to do it. I forget that I've actually got it all on my phone until way, way later. And I also wanted to get off Crossfell in the light. So I just wanted to do Dufton, get on with it, up and down Crossfell. I still managed to get lost on Crossfell because I think the sun was really low, and you could actually not see because the sun was right. It actually made it impossible to see forward because it was so low in the sky at that point. Fell across Greg's Hut. It was like, oh, here's Greg's Hut. That's good. Right. And then onto the big track down. And then it was just literally a case of push on to Alston. I even managed to get lost in that last bit coming to Alston. It was like... Anyway, Alston was really warm. That was quite lovely because the other aid stations had all been freezing. And again, that's going to be big learning for me for the winter. There's no guarantee you're going to get hot when you get to an aid station.
Yeah.
You've got to sort of manage that yourself. And Hardraw was really cold. Middleton was freezing. Middleton was freezing. And then Alston was really, really, really hot, which was fantastic. I mean, for me, that was great because I completely warmed up. The ladies there were great, although they were laughing as I was trying to do all my own technology. It was like, right, must now try and plug in watch, must now try and plug in spare charges. How do I do all this? Because Rich does all of this. All I do normally is turn up and run. And he has so much spare capacity normally. He's the one that's faffing about doing all of this stuff. But no, I had to do all of it. I was doing all of that. And having got all of that done, I went for a quick half-hour sleep again. And then that was it. I just like, right, okay, now I've got to get on with it and get to Bellingham and then try and get over the Cheviots in as much light as possible. And that became the mission. And it was all going really well till, I suppose, over Slaggyford, all good to Slaggyford. And then you hit just these featureless fields, and I was so lost. I've been looking at my Strava and you can just see these huge circles where I'm going round or up and down and up and down. Oh. And the more lost you get, the more frustrated you get. And instead of just doing what you're meant to do and stop, looking carefully, I've run up and down in many directions, way too fast. I should have just said, right, no, I need to think about this. Eventually I did. And then I got my phone out. And once I got my phone out and I had my OS maps, apart from just the watch, I was able to bring the two together. It didn't stop me getting lost again, but it got me out of a really tricky bit that I got myself into.
I don't think anyone arrives at the checkpoint in Bellingham without complaining about the stretch that you're talking about.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
That makes me...
It's talk about endless gates and stiles and walls and muddy fields. And yeah.
And the problem is those gates are really heavy. So, you open them, most of them are, and then they sort of fall off their hinges, and then they're now sort of way below the catch, and then you've got to sort of turn around and lift them back up again. And again, Rich and I have this thing where I open the gates and he shuts the gates. So now suddenly I'm opening gates and shutting gates. So it was another whole, and each is masses of the things, and each of them takes ages, you're right. So that really slows you down. And then the stiles were quite slippy. So I almost made my first proper sort of injury muddle when I sort of fell off the stile. And that was just sort of right. I was like, okay, slow down. Don't be stupid. Just take your time. And so when I got to Bellingham, I was just annoyed with my nav, physically totally fine. But just annoyed that I'd probably lost 2 hours. But it wasn't about the time. It was the time that I'd lost in terms of light on the Cheviots. That was the bit that was making me really cross, because I just wanted to get off those in the light. But so Bellingham, it was quite funny. Kevin was at Bellingham. He was like, focused runner. And I was thinking, I'm not sure I'm a focused runner. I'm just, I just need to get up to those hills. And Kielder Forest was exciting, which was the bit after Bellingham, because I hadn't realised that you see this, what looks like wood sculpture everywhere and wood art, and of course it's not. And everybody is just hallucinating. And I've been hallucinating for ages. But not scary. It's just like, oh, it's a person. No, it's not a person. When you get there, it won't be a person. And I was conjuring up people everywhere because I just wanted to see people. And there weren't people.
Hi, everyone. Sorry to interrupt. Just here to remind you that this episode was brought to you by Resilient Nutrition, and you can find their full range of elite long-range fuels exclusively on the BTU store now. The elite long-range fuels are a series of delicious nut butter products with micronutrients and supplements designed to give you exactly what you need when you need it. They're delicious, they're great for fueling your whatever your adventure is, and you can find them on the BTU store and nowhere else right now. store.beyondtheultimate.co.uk. That's store.beyondtheultimate.co.uk. Okay, let's get back to the podcast. I have to say, you never, because while you were bouncing through these checkpoints, I was generally around because I was traveling up the country with Kev. You never looked like you were at the point of hallucinating. You never looked that fatigued. You seemed to have, around people, you seemed to have the same energy throughout. It's part of the reason we were all so convinced you were just going to be fine. You were going to get there.
I mean, I was fine, and I knew I was hallucinating, so it wasn't.
Wow.
And I knew, so my brain was working still and properly. It was just that I think it's just somehow your eyes and I don't know quite how it works, but your eyes and your brain definitely disconnect, and you start to, to the point you stop and look at these things. I was stopping and wow, that's really great. And then, I was thinking, gosh, I'm actually starting to be really creative here. Look, I can see really great faces, and I'm not necessarily a very creative person. So it's like, wow. So the hallucinations were really interesting because I hadn't realized that there wasn't sculpture until I saw James at the finish, and he went, wow, did you see the stuff in Kielder Forest? And I was like, what? All that amazing wood sculpture. They've done a really good job. And he was like, no, Anna, there is no wood sculpture. I know exactly what you're looking at. So the pair of us have been looking at the same fantastic hallucinations.
Wow.
I know, it was good. It was good. And I got to Burness, and it was just like, right, okay, now I have to nail it. And those last miles went on forever. It was talking to Richard. He has the same situation where both of us weren't sure why we were there. I spent a long time having to remind myself, this is a race and you have to follow the course. No, you can't go in a different direction. The reason you're here is this is a race. You completely forget why you're there. That's bizarre. That was really weird. And also there's that border fence up there, and I just felt like I was following the same fence for forever. And I was so convinced I was lost because I seemed to just keep going round and round this fence, through it, back. Anyway, we got to Hut 1, saw those, the lovely people in Hut 1 who were very jolly and said, "Are you fine?" I said, "Completely fine," and then promptly set off in the wrong direction. I'm like, "No, I know it's that way." It was like, "Oh, okay, that way." So they set me back off on the right route again. And then it was just a focus to get to Hut 2, and it went on, and it was getting dark, so my anxiety levels are now starting to go up because I know I'm going to have to nav in the dark again. And it would all be fine, and watches are great, but I'm of a certain age where I can't actually see it in the dark. So that's the major problem, that little blue triangle on the red line. If you're, when your eyesight starts to, and I'm like this, trying to see it, I actually couldn't see it anymore. And so I was then trying to do it with the phone, but then you've got poles, and I need to sort out my glasses, basically, or sort out my lenses for racing. So by the time I got to Hut 2, the guys were like, "Are you fine?" I'm like, "Physically, I am totally fine. Mentally, no. Do one of you want to come with me up to the top?" Because, and they were like, the medic went, "No, I don't really like climbing hills." I said, "No, I'm not worried about the hills. Can you just come with me and show me the path?" He was like, "I just don't like hills. I've had to walk up here, and I really don't like climbing hills."
Incredible.
It was incredible. But then I did check with the medic boss later on, and she said, he actually, had texted her and said from the bottom before he had to climb up to Hut 2, "I didn't realise there was such a big hill." So he wasn't making it up. So I sort of headed off up the Shill, and I thought I was looking for a hut on the Shill, and then just thought, well, I don't really care. I'm not going to find it. I'm just going to keep going. And just that bit down takes a very long time. And then once I hit anything solid, that was it. I was just went for it. I literally downhilled it as if it was my life depended on it. I felt like my life depended on it. I was like, "I must get off this hill." And just nailed it down there. Went a little bit wrong halfway down. There's some sort of little area that you can go slightly wrong, which I did. But then just carried on straight down to the bottom. And I sort of reading stuff, and people are thinking I was really racing for the record. It was like, I didn't even know there was a record. And I was just desperate to get to people, and desperate to get off that hill, and not have to nav anymore. So it's quite interesting the way you see a story being sort of made up behind the scenes. It was like, it was nothing like that. So I think that last section is really tough. Not tough physically, but tough mentally for everybody. It's just a lot longer than everybody, I think, expects. And 27 and 28 miles can feel a very long way at that point in the game. I was surprised. We'd recce'd it, but I think it only took an extra hour, but it felt like it took an extra 10 compared to the recce.
Oh, we see it every year. Every single time people go into the Cheviots, and the mindset after Burness is, it's just the Cheviots and now I'm in. It's just the Cheviots and now I'm in. You are talking about a very, very long stretch that is not easy to navigate, with probably the most changeable weather on the course, which we saw, which we really saw during this race. It is to be taken seriously, but. I also think it's really interesting what you said there about the story that forms around what you've done afterwards. Because afterwards, it's just, you came in, Anna looks absolutely fine. She's been happy and bouncy all the way through the race. She set this incredible course record. Amazing. She must have had an outstanding race. It must have just gone perfectly for her. But no. She never set out with the intention of running it on her own. Had to cobble together the nav, got lost a couple of times. I mean, you were racing daylight. I just keep popping up in the back of my head, like, if your nav had been perfect and you'd started on your own and this had been the plan all along, what would you have done then?
And I think, we've sort of looked at that, because obviously then the minute you've done a time, people are like, "Are you going to go for the FKT? Are you going to, what's next?" kind of thing. There's definitely a lot of hours that could be taken out. Just if I didn't have to shut gates. Just silly things like that. If I wasn't carrying a silly heavy pack, because my pack was probably 6 kilos a lot of the time when it was full with water. When you start looking at 10% body weight, you take that off. That has quite a big impact on heart rate. That means you can just run a bit faster. So you start to add up all those bits and pieces, and you think, yes. Then on the other side, you think, well, there was the neurological downtime where I'm faffing, and Kevin, and probably you as well, watch me empty my bag, put it all back in, empty it all back in. 3 times, 4 times at Middleton? Yes. Yeah. I got home, found the buffs at the bottom of the bag. So it was, so that sort of stuff. I mean, how much time did I waste doing that? 10, 15 minutes, probably, just faffing about easily. So messing about, thinking I'd have a shower, thinking, well, you just wouldn't do that if you were thinking cogently. You'd just get on with it. But does it give you the brain space to then say, to then be able to carry on? Does it just give you that rest that you need? I just don't know. We spent quite a long time thinking about the neurological piece of just constantly running and having those breaks. And maybe some of this just added breaks. I don't know. I think having people with me, I'd have gone faster because I was just lonely. I found it quite lonely out there. I know some people love ultras because they're out there on their own in the middle of nowhere, and that's what really excites them. It's not what excites me. So I think that would help me go quicker, just having some company. I like having, even if we're not chatting, I'm used to having Richard somewhere around. And one of my hallucinations up on the Chevits was I could hear poles tapping behind me. And I turn around and think it was Richard, and it wasn't. And that sort of stuff, I think you'd go quicker without it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't spend the time turning around. You wouldn't spend the time investigating the sculptures in Kill the Forest, having a really good look. But then would you run slower? I don't know. So
I see what you mean. Those little cognitive breaks could be quite helpful for you, because we all know you were in good physical condition towards the end, and so are a lot of the other runners that are within the sort of top 10 that come across the line. That's not necessarily what's slowing them down by that point. It's that they can no longer spell their own name or count their own legs as they're coming over the Cheviot.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, maybe there is something to be said for that. And also, I don't want to focus too much on talking about, well, what could you have done if you'd have done this? What the fact stands, you came in 40 hours ahead of your nearest competitor. You did beat a course record, and you came second overall. And I just, it's a fantastic achievement as it stands for me, without picking it apart too much.
Thank you. It was. I mean, for me, it was a very good day out, or a few days out. And I think one of the things we've learned from doing it is I think you can do about the amount of hours that me, Ian, Sabrina, that John are doing. I think that 80-hour mark you can do on those half-hour kips. I think what we saw with Richard is he ended up at 97 hours, and it's that extra bit where he was just, as falling asleep down the final track into Kirkieto, just having to take constant sleeps. And I think if I was planning a race, if you think you're going to start going over that 80-hour mark, I think you just have to plan for a bigger sleep earlier, or know that you're going to have to put one in. That seems to be just what you can cope with as a human.
I mean, I haven't got the statistical evidence exactly to back it up, but after closely following 3 winter spines and this summer one now, I agree. There seems to be a tipping point where there are people who are very, very quick and they manage to get away with 30, 45 minutes sleep up the entire course. I think Jasmine was about 40 minutes as well, something like that. But there seems to be a tipping point where if you don't manage to get yourself in somewhere between 80, 85 hours, then you're going to need a longer sleep at some point, because whatever condition you're in physically, you've now pushed out so far that cognitively you're going to be in trouble if you don't sleep.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a neurologist. I'm a social media guy, but from what I've seen of the condition of people coming over the lines, I'd be inclined to agree with that.
Yeah, I think, and Richard's much better on no sleep than me usually. So I think that we did do quite a lot of data analysis, because one of the things ahead of going into the race, you asked about the prep. And I asked Richard to really analyse what people had done in terms of the way they'd gone out. And they all go out really fast, and then they all really slow down. And we'd also watched one of the guys do his 100-mile track race recently, and he just kept constant splits, really constant. I was like, I don't understand why the 100-mile track guys would go for constant splits. And yet when people are racing these races, they're going out, I don't know, at 6 miles an hour and then dropping to 3 or 4. That doesn't add up to me. Why would you do that? So that was one of our things, was to try and keep it really, really consistent. We need a bit of fade, but we were not looking for that massive fade, which most people seem to have. I don't know if that's because we're older athletes. It's just easier for us to be consistent rather than to go off hard. It meant that we could eat, meant that we could drink. But again, I think that's something for people to consider how they race themselves. If they're much more sort of consistent and they work best consistently, they need to kind of work out what time they think they can do and then work it back into what does that look like in miles an hour. And we knew that to hold 4 miles an hour was going to be hard. It's really hard on that terrain. You think it's going to be really easy, 4 miles an hour. How hard can that be?
Yeah, I must walk that speed going to my local Tesco's.
Exactly.
Different. It's a different thing.
It really is. So I haven't yet gone back. Well, no, Richard hasn't yet gone back and analysed the data and the Strava, and he'll be able to work out what we did and how we slowed and all the rest of it. But I would think it's fairly consistent, because people were saying to me, "You're still moving really well up the hills." I think I was probably just moving the same, but that translated to looking really good compared to how other people were starting to slow.
Yeah, I think you've got a very good point there. I think back now, and what you hear a lot in the chatter on the start line is, I'm going to push out because I really want to get to this point before it gets dark, or I'm going to push out because I want to be past this point before the weather gets bad. And you just think, but you're taking a lot out of your legs. You're taking a lot out of your account that you're going to need further up the course, surely. And surely you've got the kit to be able to get through that weather. Yeah. Surely you're going to have to nav at night at some point. So maybe reel it in a little bit at the start, But psychologically, people seem to get a lot out of, I really want to cover the first 40 miles as much as possible so I can say I've done that, and maybe that offers them some comfort. But I feel like your approach, we can show here that your approach definitely bears fruit.
Well, I was reading John Kelly's blog recently, post his FKT, and he talks about how much time how much faster he's going to have to run to make up for the time he's stopping. So if you can actually just maintain a constant effort with minimal stops, when it starts to really average out. And I think that was always our plan. Now, I know it went wrong with big stop at Hardraw with Richard and faffing about, but nonetheless, it was still in the back of our minds, minimize the stops. Plus, I think talking to the physio, when, if you're not moving, your lymphatic system isn't doing anything either. You need to be moving for that. So then you start to get, and I know Sabrina's talked about, then you start to get the inflammation building the longer you stop. And so for us, again, as the older athlete, we knew that if we started to stiffen up, life was going to get quite bad. So it was a case of, if we can just keep gently moving or minimizing the stopping, that can only help. That was, again, part of our mindset, which we'll try and take into the winter.
Yeah, no, that makes very good sense. You seem to have learnt an awful lot of lessons out of going up here, and now I'm going to ask if maybe we can pass on some more of that to the people that will be doing what you did, which is listening to people talk about the spine to help them prepare for theirs. What is there a particular piece of kit you wish you'd had with you that you didn't have?
For winter, I'll definitely have a sleeping bag in my bag.
Yes.
I'll be carrying one because it's different. But I think even for summer, now I know what the aid stations look like, especially if you're going to have to put in a slightly longer sleep. I would definitely have something lightweight in my bag. That for sure. One thing I never took out is the hard mug from my actual bag, but I had a bigger hard mug in my drop bag. That was really useful because you can, you don't want to carry a huge hard mug. You really don't, but they make you, and they test it when they literally are tapping it.
Oh, yeah.
Registration. Oh, yes. So I would have a bigger hard mug because you want to get the fluids in. And if you're constantly asking for another drink, and if the aid stations were busy and I was on my own, so I felt like the queen. They were just running around and looking after me, which was amazing, but they may not have that sort of time. So
in the winter, if we don't have the COVID start waves again, those checkpoints around the middle of the pack are packed. Shoulder to shoulder. So yeah, be as prepared as possible. So
having a big mug, and then be ready to have what you want to drink. So I always drink hot water and lemon. That's just what I drink. I don't drink tea. I do drink coffee, but this was what I want to drink. So I carried my own lemon juice, and they just gave me hot water with a bit of cold water in, and then I just shoved in my own lemon. So having that accessible was really good. Other stuff I would have, I would take far less changes of clothes. I think the reality is, even unless you're planning to stop for a long time, but even then you put on a dry set, and probably I put on a wet set to leave, because when you're moving, you're not cold. I I suspect even the winter that's true. And probably in the winter you're not getting sweaty, so you're probably actually not. You may be wet from the rain, but then if it's, say, I don't know, an icebreaker type top, a merino wool, you're not going to get that cold. So my 5 sets of kit, one for each checkpoint to change, that was a waste of time and a waste of weight, because when you've got your 20 kilos, that you just wouldn't want that. I think food-wise, we took our own. I mean, I baked a ton of scones, I baked brownies, so we basically took our own baking pretty much, and then some Bella Forte bars. I found all I could eat was relatively plain. So I was having plain scones with raisins in them, and that basically did me. That was it, pretty much. That I started with some flapjack. You've got to test what's going to live in a bag, because it's got to live in a bag. I was listening to the boys at the end, and they were saying things like they'd had a hot meal, they'd taken the dehydrated food and got some hot water added. I ate the aid station food. I would never normally do that, but actually it was just what I wanted. When you're reading, curry and chili, and you're looking at that thinking, God, I never want that. But actually that spicy food was exactly what you wanted, fun enough. So I think the aid station food is very good. And I had bagels in my bag, and they toasted them for me, and I had them with cheese, and that was just brilliant. So I think it's work out what you think you're going to be able to eat, and be prepared for the fact you might not be able to eat it. So, and the other bit of kit I have a Patagonia Nano Puff, and the minute I got into an aid station, put it on.
That makes good sense.
That was really good. And that was what I had up the hill, which I then had to stuff in my rucksack when Richard didn't come with me. But that was a brilliant piece of kit to have. And then the usual buffs and stuff. So I think, most ultra runners have their kit and have their shoes. We had shoes. I wore waterproof socks. My silly stripy socks, my deck shells, they were fabulous. My feet were clean. They were tidy. They were blistered, but I think everyone's feet are blistered. But I think find socks that work. And I think in the winter, having waterproof socks is going to be a winner. But that means your shoes have to be bigger.
Absolutely.
So we experimented with that quite a lot during the hiking. And I suppose I didn't expect to have my feet taped by medics. I'd never had feet problems before, but actually I think most people probably end up with their feet being dealt with by medics, and just to accept that and not worry about it.
The medics are there, and they are expert at that. So make the most. Yeah,
and they were great. So I don't know how that works again, middle pack. If there's queue for medics, that's the only...
Well, yeah. There's far fewer medics than there are runners, but but
they were great. So I don't know if that gives some ideas of the things that we used. We just used our salmon packs because we wanted to be able to access everything, and come winter that's going to be interesting, because we're going to have to make sure that we can find a pack that allows us to do that and take all the essential kit. Because realistically, if things are going well, we won't be getting our stoves out. We won't be getting our bibbies out. So it's like, can you get rid of that somewhere, but have everything you want just close at hand to make sure that you are drinking, you are eating?
Well, it's sort of excellent, really, that you've done this incredibly advanced recce that you've just been through, because you've seen some of these problems months in advance, which is fantastic. And for the people listening at home, you can now benefit from that.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing we really found was when your hands are wet, you can't get your hands in your gloves.
Yeah, very true.
Those silly things that make life really, really difficult. So we've got the Montane, just the over waterproof gloves. They're just literally sort of shells, and we put them on over our hands, actually. And that takes the wind off, takes the chill off, but keeps them dry. So the minute it starts to rain, we try and keep our hands dry, because once they're wet, you cannot get them in the gloves.
Yeah.
I'm sure every adventurer and mountaineer knows this, but for us, it was a bit of well, for me, not for Richard, but for me, it was a bit of a surprise. I'm like, I can't get my hand in. So there we go. Those were the things that we really found helpful. I think on the drop bag, we did it in boxes. So we had a box with food, just in case something broke or exploded or was disgusting. And then we had a bag with clothes. And then we had a box with sort of first aid. So you could find, because when you're a bit brain dead, it's quite useful to know where to go. So even though those Tupperware boxes did add weight, they took out stress.
I think that's always worth it. You're not going to be thinking very clearly by the time you get 3-4 checkpoints up the course.
Actually,
so make it easy on yourself.
Yeah. Know what's in those bags as well, as you saw, looking for stuff that's not there. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. And I'm going to have to ask then, what is next? Have you had time in a week to sort of think about what your next challenge might be? Because this was, if you look at your 2019, that sort of year where you were just win after win after win, those were all sort of around the 100-mile mark. So this is a stretch further than that. Has it opened your eyes a bit to other longer events?
Well, I've got the Lakeland 100 next, which is 4 weeks time. So so I will, I think, do that unless for any reason I'm not recovered. And then we were going to be doing TDS, but we pushed that back because they gave us an option, and we just decided with COVID it just wasn't worth thinking. It was just too much hassle. Then there's Dragon's Back. We've both got places in Dragon's Back, so we are meant to be doing, which I don't think is going to be my sort of thing, because it's multi-day as opposed to one big thing. And I suspect stopping in between and camping is not going to be my thing. But we'll see. It's also quite a lot of scrambling, which is definitely not my thing. But we'll see. So the next thing is to start recceing that and doing all of that. I mean, I do want to do something longer, something FKT like. Just need to then start thinking about how I go about doing that. Right now, I'm just really enjoying being able to run again. It was so long not being able to run that I just want to really keep enjoying that and just make the most of it, really. I know David Roche, who wrote The Happy Runner, says it, but we're always just sort of one run away from being injured, and we really are. And so you kind of forget you have to really enjoy the running, because the next day you might not be running, and then you'll be really cross that you didn't enjoy the ones you could do. So that's my plan for the summer, really. See what falls in. But the planned races are the Lakeland 100 and Dragon's Back, and then of course Winter Spine. So maybe try and fit something in between Dragon's Back and Winter Spine, depending on how things go.
Well, fantastic. I mean, I look forward to watching your performances on those events, and what an excellent sentiment to sort of come to an end on there as well. That it's a very good point. You might get injured on your next one, so enjoy the one you're doing now.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. Well, Anna, you really seemed outwardly, at least, to be really enjoying your run on the Spine. And I have to say that from our side of things, from the team that was covering it, we loved what you did. It was absolutely incredible watching you pull that performance out. And just congratulations once more.
Thank you. And I can't close without saying thank you to that whole Spine team. I mean, it's really hard to understand the amount of time everybody is putting in on a voluntary basis for that race. And they're there out all night as well, with no sleep as well. We were chatting before about how little sleep the media team are getting, but equally it's the checkpoint staff. It's everybody's as sleep deprived as the runners. So I felt really looked after. Which was great, because I was used to Richard being around to look after me, and he'd gone. So it was brilliant to have everybody. So a huge thank you from me to everybody on that team for looking after me so well along the course.
Well, that's wonderful. Thanks very much, Anna. I won't take up any more of your day. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you. Lovely to see you. Bye, all.
Bye.